Welcome to the Shower Epiphanies podcast, where we explore your hidden thoughts and desires, revealing your greatest drop the mic moments. Now, here's your host, Art Costello.
Welcome to the Shower Epiphanies podcast. Today, my guest is Madeleine Black from Glasgow, Scotland, and I'm really honored to have her. She's an international speaker. She's involved in many things, but more so than anything else is her story. Her story is absolutely brought me to tears, brought me to joy. Her resilience is really remarkable. Without any further ado, here's Madeleine.
Thank you so much for having me on your show. It's lovely to be here.
I'm honored. I really am. Can you tell us your story?
Sure. So my story starts in the late 1970s when I was just 13 years old and I was gang raped by two American teenagers.
And I don't want to get into details of the event, but what has intrigued me in reading your story is how you got through it, how you developed your resilience.
Yeah, well, I have to say, for anyone listening, my resilience didn't come in overnight. It's been a process, and it's taken me years, actually decades, to get to where I'm at. So I don't want people who are struggling, that are listening, thinking, I'll never get there, because I never assumed I would get to where I'm at. But, you know, there was something always inside me, once I decided to heal, that always drove me to clean up my trauma, just clean up. And I was driven to do many different types of talking therapies, body therapies, alternative therapies. And it was really when my eldest daughter, Anna, turned 13 that things really changed for me, because then all my memories from that night came back in the forms of flashbacks, nightmares, pictures. And, you know, at first I thought I was going a bit crazy. I thought if it was so bad, surely I would remember it. But now I understand it's because it was so bad. That's why my mind thought it was safer to shut it out. And I was the worst kind of client. I went back to therapy and I said, I want you to take these memories away. I don't want to look at them anymore. And I realized after he laughed that actually my way in was going to be my way out, that I had to find a place to accept all that was done to me, to acknowledge I can't change it anymore, and to learn to be okay, because after all, it didn't kill me. I had survived it. It wasn't happening anymore. And I don't think I am my body. I don't think I am the events that happened to me, even though they have shaped my life. So very near to the end of this 3 years of my final lot of therapy, he turned to me one day and said, you know, maybe these two guys weren't born rapists. And I can't tell you how angry I was with this man. I thought, how dare he say that to me? Because I fantasized for years about somebody kidnapping the two of them, taking them to an empty flat, beating them up, tying them up, and raping and torturing them for 4 or 5 hours on end, just like they had done to me. But, you know, he planted a seed in my mind, which started to grow arms and legs, and I found myself wanting to understand what had conditioned these two young men to make them behave so violently towards another human being. You know, what had they seen or heard or experienced so they could behave that way? And I do believe that we are all born a blank sheet. I don't believe we come in a rapist or a murderer or a terrorist. I think we are conditioned by life. And somehow, I don't know where, I call myself an accidental forgiver, I found compassion in my heart towards these two young men, because I thought, I have done a really good job of refusing to be identified by what had happened to me. They have to live with what they did to another human being, and I can't imagine that would be easy. I'm not saying I could ever forgive the act of rape, but I could forgive them for being human and their predicament.
The need to have closure in any given situation is sheer human nature. And when it comes to romantic relationships, this desire skyrockets. Has your previously failed relationship left you in immense pain? It's not uncommon for people to shy away from a new relationship after their first one fails miserably. The fear of the unknown makes them hide in a shell to prevent any future heartbreak. Relatable? Despite wanting to love and be loved, you can't take the plunge if your mind and heart are still locked somewhere in the past. Maybe you aren't aware of the power of releasing the past, or perhaps you don't know how to do it. Art Costello in his online course teaches the art of moving on from bad places to happier, more stable ones. This course can change your life for good, helping you beat all kinds of negativity on the road to eternal bliss. Sign up now before the gloominess gets the better of you at expectationacademy.com.
It's really interesting because I think I just had a thought about some research that I had read about how when people have things happen to them and forgiveness, it's a really complicated thing. You're not forgiving them. You're really forgiving yourself.
Absolutely.
for
If you think of the word, it's forgiving. And it's forgiving me a better chance. It's forgiving me the chance to let go. You know, I didn't need them in front of me to say, I'm really sorry for what we did. I didn't need them for me to say to them, listen, I forgive you. It was a decision I made internally, in my heart, in my mind. I thought, when I'm angry and hating life and them, they had no idea. My anger is only hurting me, poisoning myself, my husband, my kids, which I struggled to have for years. They had no idea if I'm holding on to all of that resentment. It's only harming me. And I thought, yes, I have to work the trauma out of my system. You can't just get to this place overnight, like I said. But I could see I could go many ways. I could hold on to that anger, and it's like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. Or I could choose to let it all go, realizing that it's only going to harm me if I don't let it go. So it transformed my pain into peace, really.
Mm-hmm. That's really a testimony on the power of choice.
Yeah.
You know, because choice is so important to our growth and how we grow. When you realize that you have that power, did you have an epiphany that brought you to the point of coming to this whole realization? What triggered it?
I guess my epiphany happened many, many years ago, because I can remember the exact moment when it came in. When I first met Stephen, my husband, I told him I'd never become a mum because I thought giving birth was just going to be like being raped again, and I couldn't face that, the fears and men working on my body, all of it just seemed horrific. But we would take all our annual leave and go away every winter to somewhere warm and exotic. And we had been in Thailand. We'd been married a couple of years. And we're walking on a beautiful beach at the end of our 4-week holiday. And he turned to me and said, how about starting a family? And, you know, I was all ready for my usual response of, Stephen, you know why I can't do that? And something came in. And there and then I thought, if I never become a mum, they've won. I'm still giving them all my power and control over me. And I thought, I don't want them to do that anymore. So there I came up with my plan that I call my best revenge. And I was determined that I would become a mum. And I was determined to find a way to clean up the trauma and just refusing to be identified by what had happened to me and to live my life as best as I could. So I guess that was the start of my epiphany, if you call it, or for me, I call it the start of my healing journey.
Mm-hmm.
That reversing my decision on motherhood.
Wow, that's beautiful, really. I just had a thought. You must have an incredible husband.
Yeah, he's not bad. It's now 35 years later, so yeah, it's good. It's good.
Yeah. But he's had to have been understanding and supportive.
Yeah, and you know, I've done a lot of strange therapies in my past. I've been to like 50 sweat lodges. I've taken San Pedro, which is a bit like ayahuasca. I've done firewalks. I've been to transformational breath work. And he says, just go. If it helps, just go. He's never wanted to come, but he says, if it helps you, just go. So he's very supportive.
Oh, that's really good. How much has your past played in your role of becoming a psychotherapist now?
Yeah, it's interesting. A lot of people assume it's because of what happened to me. Maybe subconsciously there is that in me. But my father was a Holocaust survivor, and his mother and his father, 4 or 5 brothers and sisters. His youngest brother, Mordechai, was just 6 years old. They were all killed, murdered in Auschwitz. And so I was always really intrigued at a young age how my dad loved life. He mucked about. He was a big child himself. And his only surviving sibling, my Auntie Eva, if she heard a motorbike, she thought the Gestapo were coming to get her. She had chronic schizophrenia, agoraphobia, OCD, I was always fascinated how two people were in a similar environment and they come out so differently. That always intrigued my mind.
Boy, I just got goosebumps because, my family escaped Prussia early on and came to America. And I have Jewish blood that runs through me. But what made my skin get goosey bumps all over it was that when you said that how two people can go through the same experience and come out differently. Because in my childhood, we were moved from living in a very urban area to a very rural area, and it left me feeling lonely and abandoned. And I chose to come out of it by escaping from the little town that we had moved to and living life where my brother and sister stayed there and have lived the life of a rural community. And we're so different. My brother and sister, my brother's passed away now, but my sister and brother and I are all I'm so different than them. And I have always wondered why I am so different and why I chose the path that I did. And I thought it was, and I've always looked at it as a journey of faith, because when I was 9, I went to the top of this hill and had a conversation with God, asked what was going to happen to me. And that's how I learned about expectations and how to handle them and all that, even though at the time I didn't know it. But it really propelled me into a different way of thinking and understanding the power of choice, the power of expectation, and living our dream, living for the moment. I think Vietnam taught me. I'm a former Marine and was in Vietnam. So those experiences, though, I have done the same thing that you have done, different circumstances. And, I'm not saying that anyone's trauma is worse than any other person's
it's not
trauma.
about comparison, because I really believe it's not what happens to us that is important, but it's what we do with what happens to us that matters.
Amen, amen, amen.
And if we choose to, we can get past anything that happens to us.
That is a powerful truth. And I want people to hear that. If we choose to get through something, we can take it on and get through it, no problem.
And my father, it wasn't really by what he said, but how he lived his life. I saw that it's possible to really, all your family murdered in Auschwitz. You couldn't get much more traumatic. Being an orphan, not speaking the language, coming to a different country, starting again. If he could get past all of that, surely I could get past one night. But he also showed me that life was for living. My dad loved life.
That is the other thing that I have found with people who have experienced trauma. When they experience trauma, they learn this lesson that life is really valuable and that it is worth living. It's another choice we make, whether we can choose to let it consume us or we can consume it.
And I did let it consume me for years. I numbed out, I shut down. I was just like an ice block. I couldn't feel or think or speak. But eventually, obviously, over years, I've kind of hit the defrost button, and I slowly have emerged back from the numbness. Because you have to shut it down to protect yourself. It would be too much for it all to come out in one go. You have to find a way to defrost.
Yeah. Can we talk about your teenage years, what it was like?
Yes, so because I couldn't find my voice, I couldn't physically say what had happened. I was terrified because I was threatened that if I did speak about it, they would come find me and kill me, and I believed them. I couldn't say what had happened, so it took me 3 years where I actually wrote a note, but in the meantime, what we don't speak about leaks out of us. So I developed an eating disorder, anorexia. I had depression. I used drugs and alcohol to numb out further. I had fears, phobias. I became suicidal. I attempted suicide and ended up in a psychiatric ward for children for about 2 or 3 months. It affected me in so many ways. It was a really dark, dark time in my life. Not really, with all those things, the worst thing was my attitude to myself. I thought I was dirty, contaminated, worthless. I didn't understand the point to me. What was the purpose of my life? I'd be better off for me and everyone else if I wasn't here. It just left me with no confidence, with no self-belief, no self-worth at all.
How did you gain it back?
Slowly. And really, I think obviously I've been very fortunate that I met Stephen, because he was the first man that really I felt safe with, which is a really strange word to use, but it is true. I felt safe with, I could trust him. And I met him, I was in Israel for a year, and I met this Glaswegian, and I was amazed he still wanted to see me when we came back to the UK. And I would drive the poor man mad. Why do you want to be with me? How could you possibly love someone like me? What do you see in me? And he was just consistent. He just said, I just love you. And really over time, with his love, I saw many things, that I was lovable, that I was able to give love back, and I could start to love myself. And love is always going to win. Love will always win over hate. And really learning to liking myself to begin with, and then loving myself, realizing it was never my fault. I never invited it in. I didn't do anything wrong. All the guilt I felt for years, the shame, it was never my shame. The shame belonged to them. I held on to inappropriate shame for years and years and years, and that's what kept me silent.
Unconditional love. I knew that Steve had something special to offer you, because, you know, in my mind, I was thinking, how did she get through this? What broke her out of it and all that? And I could imagine you thinking, who's ever going to love me?
Yeah.
And then to open yourself up to the love that Steve has for you.
Yeah.
It's really a testament to both of you.
Yeah.
It's really, really powerful to the word unconditional love. He loved you unconditionally for who you are.
Absolutely.
And that is so freeing. It is when you know that you're unconditionally loved without any conditions on it. It's a powerful transformation that goes on with inside of you.
Yeah, and it also started the ripples to start to love myself and to be able to give love back, because I built a barrier around myself, and brick by brick the barrier has come down, the wall that I built to protect myself, my defense mechanism. You know, it kept me from people, and it kept me from the world, and it kept people coming in. So eventually the wall had to come down.
And it's beautiful that it did. And now you're doing so many great things. Can you kind of tell us what you're doing now that is, I know you're involved in a ton of stuff, and I want you to tell us about your book.
Yeah, so I published my story, my memoir, which is called Unbroken, nearly 2 years ago, 2 years in April. And it was actually just before then, in September 2014, that I shared my story with an organization called the Forgiveness Project. And Marina, who is the founder, refers to us as story healers rather than storytellers. And she believes in the power of sharing our stories, sharing our narratives. And I agree, you know, it's not what it can do for me now, it's what it could do for other people. But sharing my story just opened so many doors. And I was invited to speak, to do radio, TV interviews, podcasts, in newspapers, magazines. But the more I went to speak at an event, the more I would be asked to speak elsewhere. So I am a psychotherapist, but this year I've decided to finish up doing therapy with people and focus on speaking more, and to just share my message of finding your voice, healing your past, living your now, you know, being present, live courageously, all the messages, hope. I just want to go out and speak and share my story.
And you're involved in a program called Restore that works with the prison system?
I've only just been to one program. It's run by the Forgiveness Project. It's been run for about 10 years, and they go into prisons and they work with men and female prisoners. It's about a 3.5-day course, and they prepared me a little bit before I went in, but nothing could have prepared me for how profoundly moved and touched I was by the work that's done in these projects. It was incredible. So Restore really is working with we had about 15 prisoners. I saw the Women's Project, and it's about how do you restore yourself? What's your anchor? It's about forgiveness. It's a personal development course over 3.5 days, and we use artwork. So they draw pictures, they draw their lifeline. We use words, they write poetry, they write a diary every night. And it's also about the power of sharing our stories. So they have a storyteller who will share her story. And once they've all drawn their lifeline, they will share their story amongst their peers. And it just is incredible what comes up and how much they grow. You know, one woman said to me, this course has changed her life. And you think, gosh, 3.5 days and her life has been changed. So really powerful stuff. And I'm booked to go later on this year to go back and hopefully see the men's program and to go and do another course on the Restore. So yeah, it was really good.
Has anyone ever inspired you to discover a happier, healthier, and more fulfilled you? It is a magical experience, isn't it? Inspiration is indeed very powerful, yet it's often undermined. It can lift you from the ground to the sky in no time. Have you ever thought about returning the favor by inspiring the people around you? If you don't think you have it in you, we have good news for you. Art Costello's online course has everything you need to learn to supercharge yourself and shape your character into a powerful personality. Get ready to discover your strengths and unleash the creativity within. Don't believe it? Check it out yourself by signing up for this life-changing course at expectationacademy.com. That's expectationacademy.com.
Are these prisoners, are they about to be released back into,
or are they? They're recruited by prison officers, and they're recruited as people that they know are very open and willing to do personal development. We had some people that had done the course before and were desperate to come back and carry on. There was one woman who was a lifer, so she wasn't going anywhere. So they were all at very different stages of their sentences, but there's no discrimination. It's open to anyone that's willing to do the course.
You know, I've done some prison work and we did some research, and part of our research, we went in and asked, we had a questionnaire, and on the questionnaire, it asked the question, were you told as a child that you were going to go to prison? Mm-hmm. And we found that 89.8% of the people that we surveyed, which is men, women, young adults, lifers, all of them, had heard as a child, you're going to end up in prison. It's really astounding.
They kind of lived it. What was amazing to me was how many of the women said to me, coming to prison has saved their life, because they were in such a really negative situation before, abusive or, being pimped out by a boyfriend or drug addiction. And they were determined while they're in prison to educate themselves, clean up their acts, go out, do something different. And I was like, that's just so sad that coming to prison has saved them, because it woke them up to what's going on.
Yeah, I keep having these thoughts. And one of the questions I had or have for you is, whatever happened to the 2 boys that raped you? Do you know?
No, I don't. So I never spoke about it because they threatened me and I believed them. And when I was 16, so 3 years later, I wrote a little note because my parents were really losing patience with me. I was very rebellious. I was going out when they said, don't go out. And one morning I snuck back in, 6 a.m, and my mum is shouting at me, don't you know what can happen? Inside my head, I'm shouting the words, it's already happened, but I still couldn't speak it. So I left a note on my pillow, briefly explaining what had happened. And when I came home, my dad said, is this true? And I said, yeah. When they called the other girl involved, she said, no, it didn't happen like I said it had. They were nice boys. They were sons of diplomats. They wouldn't have done that. They just took us home. And my mum was really, really quiet. And it took me many years before I understood her quietness. But I misunderstood her quietness as that she didn't believe me. My dad was desperate to go to the police, and I just said no, I was too scared. And my mum also supported me in not going to the police. And I found out many years later that my mum had been raped when she was 8 years old by a neighbour. Oh. And when this had happened, he was also discovered to be raping his daughters. So he was sent to prison. He was charged, found guilty. And my grandparents moved away, and they never spoke about it again. So when I am revealing my story, my mum's getting triggered by her trauma. My dad didn't know. They had 5 of us. Even when he passed, he still didn't know. She's remarried and I have a stepfather he now knows. She couldn't find her voice. But I've never known what's happened to these 2 because I never charged them.
Mm-hmm. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I'm okay about it because I couldn't do it at the time and it was right for me. And people say, well, don't you want to find them now and charge them now? I've got no inclination at all to meet with them, see them. And I've had some nasty people, not many, saying, well, somebody left a review on Amazon saying that because she didn't report it, they're now out raping other people and it's her fault. And it's absolutely never my fault. If you don't report your car getting stolen and your neighbor's car is stolen, that's not your fault. But why, when it's an intimate crime like rape, we put all the emphasis on the victim? We don't look at the rapist or the abuser. We turn it on the victim. It's my fault if they've gone out and raped again. No, it's not. 100% of all rapes are caused by rapists.
Mm-hmm. You know, I think it's because it's easy to point the finger to the victim.
Yeah, and it's a culture
and people
that we
choose
live in.
that. Yeah, and that's sad.
It's really bad, and it's really damaging because it keeps people quiet, and our silence just protects the perpetrators.
You know, with the Me Too movement now, people are coming out more and more and more
Absolutely.
about what's happened to them. And it is extremely difficult to come out. I mean, you know, I have events that happened in my life that I think about that I can't talk about and that I haven't talked about with, oh no, it's not easy. Even when you're trained and even when you know, it's really difficult. So I'm very, very aware of it and in tune with it. And my belief is that ultimately the man up above has the final say in everything. And what role has faith played in your journey? And I don't mean necessarily a religious faith.
Yeah, I wouldn't really say I was religious. I'm a real mixture. So my dad was from former Czechoslovakia Jewish. My mum's parents were Irish Roman Catholic. So we're a bit of a mixture. And so when my mum married my father, my grandma held a mass and said her daughter had died and gone to hell. So I don't really like religion too much, but I like the Jewish traditions. I have brought up my kids Jewish, and I like all of the traditions, but I really believe in the essence of a good person rather than a religious person. I believe in being a good human being. So I guess my faith has been my drive to just clean up the trauma. Something has always driven me, and I don't know where that's come from. I always feel like somebody or something is at my back. When I'm speaking at an event, don't tell any bookers, but I often don't prepare what I'm going to say, and I have faith that the words come in, and they seem to come from somewhere. The words just come in to me. When I was writing my book, when I made that decision, again, it took 6 or 8 weeks, and the words literally just downloaded in my system, and I vomited them onto the page, and in 8 weeks the book was written. So something, I don't know what it is, has always supported me and always helped me.
You're giving me goosebumps because I want you to listen to this. My mom is German Jewish.
Okay.
My father is Irish Catholic.
Mm-hmm.
We have so much. I do not write a speech.
Okay.
I just go off of my heart. I speak from my heart.
Good.
I don't prepare.
And I think people tune into that as well.
Well, I think it's authenticity, you know, because when you speak from your heart, people see it, people know it, people feel it.
Yeah.
And when you memorize something, it just comes off.
Well, my fear is I'd forget what I had to remember and then be panicked and I'd lose my place. And did I say this and did I say that? And then, so I think it's easier just to go with the flow and see where it goes.
It's very, very true. I mean, it's very true. When you're speaking in prisons, you know, do you think about the rapists that are in there? Of course, you're not worked with males yet. But
yeah, I'm sure I will come across men that have raped, but I've worked with men that have raped as a psychotherapist. And one of my clients that influenced me so much had been accused of rape, but he had been raped himself, and the man that raped him counter-accused him, so my client was in prison. So he was on the sex register, which we have in the UK, which you stay on for 15 years until it gets reviewed. And yeah, he taught me a lot. He taught me a lot, that client. But yeah, like I said, I don't believe that men are born rapists. I would really see them as a human being.
Well, I liked it that you said that we're born with a clean slate, because my belief is that our expectations are developed and they are so key in how we grow. How we expect is almost more important than anything else in our life.
Yeah.
Because we either do it positively or negatively.
Yeah, I agree with that. My friend Anne, who actually is my manager at the counseling center where I work now, she used to be a midwife, and she said something to me years ago which always stayed with me. And she said that she has delivered thousands of babies and she never once met an evil one. And that was it. We're all the same.
Yeah, we are. And the choices that we make about the events in our life dictates how we move through life. Absolutely. And how we go through it.
We hold on to all that hurt and disappointment. And if we do, what purpose does it serve? And could you also learn to let it go?
Very true. I mean, I often say to people, it's not what has happened to us that matters. It's how we react to what has happened to us that matters the most. Absolutely. And how we handle it and what we do with it.
Yeah.
Tell us about your book, where we can get it.
It's called Unbroken. Here we go. I have a copy here behind me. Ta-da. And it came out 2017 in April. And it really is my story of from that night. The first page is that night when I was 13, May 1979. And it really goes up to, I think the last chapter is called Endings and New Beginnings. So just where I got to the end of forgiveness and starting to speak or starting to share my story. So it's my journey really of surviving, healing, forgiveness, transformation, and hope.
Powerful, powerful.
Yeah.
And really when you think about it, your healing started right after the event.
Yeah, I didn't see it then, though. I didn't see it then, though.
No. But what advice would you have to any survivors?
Sure, I would say, it's never ever too late to find your voice or to get support. Find somebody out there. It doesn't necessarily have to be a therapist if you can't afford therapy, but there will be somebody you can share your story with, because to keep that all inside, it's like damaging you. It's going to leak out and impact on your body, on your mind, affect your day-to-day well-being, your mental health. The power of giving your story oxygen just shifts and moves the energy that has got trapped inside you. You can't underestimate what speaking your words, your story, your truth does to you.
It's how you reinvent yourself. It's how you heal and reinvent and move on and become more powerful.
Yeah. I think when we find our voice, we stand in our truth, and then we really stand in our power.
And then when you find your voice and you link it with being with people that that you can have an impact on, that's when it becomes very powerful, when you see it transform other people's lives.
I mean, I don't expect everybody to stand on a stage and speak and share their story or to write a book, but you need to find someone to share it to end the silence, because the silence only hurts you and protects the perpetrators. And if you can't find anybody to share your story with, write it down and tell yourself your story. Find a way to release what's been locked up inside of you.
Yeah, I think that is key, is being able to release it and verbalize it, either in, written form or verbally, all that. But there's a lot of power in being able to bring it out and get it out and deal with it.
Yeah. And in my book, I talk about the many weird and wonderful ways that I use to clean up. You don't have to try those different therapies as well. I did some things that people might think, that's a bit strange, but that's okay. There will be a way for everybody. But for me, somebody suggested that I went to therapeutic massage. That was the first time I started entering down the alternative route. And the very first time I went, I could hear this person shouting and screaming and crying and fighting with the masseuse. And then I realized it was me. It was all coming from me. And, the trauma and the pain is just trapped in ourselves. And we have to find a way to shift it, to move it. And the therapeutic massage just had this way of getting deep into what was buried inside of me. And it released so much trauma. It really helped just to clean it up.
That must have really taken a lot of strength to go to a massage.
Yeah, it was, because I was terrified of being touched, and I was terrified of being alone in the room with someone. Everything scared me. I was terrified of my own shadow. I couldn't go with a man to do a massage. It had to be a female. I couldn't let a man touch my body in case he tried to do anything to me. So I had so many conditions of everything, just to get in my car and drive to town. I had to check all the cars, check the boot, get in, put the buttons down. When I got to a car park, I couldn't park on a very high level because I'd have to walk down. I couldn't take the lift in case someone came into the lift, and everything. It was just exhausting living with this constant being on edge, always on duty, always being on guard, waiting for somebody to attack me, which was kind of crazy because it had already happened. It's like trying to shut the stable door once the horse had already bolted.
And I was thinking about PTSD. It's really what you're experiencing.
Yeah, high level of anxiety and my security. I was so scared for my security.
Yeah, and I was thinking about between the time you were 13 and 16, it must have been a constant looking over your shoulder and trying to figure out, what was coming next.
I think those years I had really more numbed out. So I wasn't really, numbing is still a feeling, but I wasn't really feeling or thinking much. And I was just what people would think a really troubled adolescent, just grunting and groaning, which kind of fits in with being an adolescent anyway. And it was more, I think, when I was maybe married and before I had kids, that I was, hyper alert all the time. And looking back, I thought I was really okay. I put on a mask pretending I was fine. But actually, when I look back now, I can see I was still very paranoid, still had so many fears and phobias. But we can convince ourselves of everything. We convince ourselves that it's quite normal to not be able to put your rubbish bin down the end of the garden because it's dark, wait till it's light. All these things. We convince ourselves of everything. It's not because I'm scared. I'll just do it in the morning. But fear was my best friend. It just ran my show for years.
Yeah, and fear is the thing that stops us from living more than anything else in our lives.
Absolutely. There I was trying to protect myself, but I was protecting myself from living my life. I was shutting myself down by my fear, yet you totally get it. And so it got to a point in my life where I saw then that my fear wasn't real. I saw my fear was based on what had happened to me or what could happen to me. So it was my imagination because the worst had already happened and something else hadn't happened yet. So right here, right now, my fear, I was okay. So it was my imagination. So I set out to really challenge my fear, which is maybe quite extreme, but it's a bit like immersion therapy. So when I was studying as a psychotherapist, we had a placement. I was in a GP and a doctor's surgery. I then asked only to see male clients because I was terrified of being in the room with men. I thought, I have to get over this. I'll never be a good therapist if I can only see women. It's cutting out 50% of my clients. And I would do things to put myself into situations like I go to karate now. I started when I was 41 and it's predominantly male. There's maybe only 2 or 3 of us women and the rest 40, 50 men. So that's 2-3 times a week. I windsurf now. I do all these things. I'm a power lifter. I go to the gym where there's just men around me grunting and dropping weights and groaning and all the rest of it. So I saw actually by facing my fears weren't real. They were my imagination.
Don't know which direction you want your life to take? Are you sinking deep down into the pit of uncertainties day by day? So, what's the secret to leading a happy, satisfied life? It's taking matters into your own hands. But what if the matters in question are a total blur? Art Costello's Expectation Academy course aims to tell you exactly how you can get some clarity in your life. This course can be your savior on your journey to reinventing yourself. While you certainly can't plan your whole future ahead, you can definitely control twists and turns your life takes. So what are you waiting for? Sign up for this course now at expectationacademy.com. Get a chance to broaden your horizons and add meaning to your life. That's expectationacademy.com.
That really brings to mind with me, some people have fear because of the unknown.
Yeah.
You didn't have fear because of the unknown. You had fear because you knew what could happen.
Yeah.
And
but it had already happened.
But it had already happened, but a lot of people let things stop them because they've never experienced it.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean
Absolutely.
by that? I mean,
So I look at the acronyms for fear. It can mean false evidence appearing real or face everything and rise. So I did the first one for a long time, then I decided to do the second one.
I've heard those before and they are powerful, because it's a choice. It goes back to about making the choices that we do. Yeah. What else is coming up? We're nearing our time to leave and I don't want
quick. Yeah. So as I said before, last year I kind of set my intentions for this year. What do I want to do? And I thought I'd really like to work internationally to spread my message wider. Mm-hmm. And I woke up on January the 1st with an invitation to go to South Africa to speak. So I'm delighted that I'm going there because rape is a huge problem there anyway. Mm-hmm. But the first talk I'm doing is at a speakers convention, which could be interesting because I'll be speaking in front of speakers, but it will be great. And then I'm speaking for a charity event as well, and I'm doing a radio show, and I'm only there for 4 or 5 days. But yeah, I just thought life is really supporting me. That's my faith. I asked to have an international event, and January the 1st, I wake up and I have an invitation. So I'm just going to see where it all goes.
Have you applied to any TEDx talks?
I did apply a few years ago up in Glasgow, but I wasn't successful. But I have been looking again recently, so I'm going to think about applying again.
Yeah, there's a trick to getting into a TEDx talk because they don't want to hear your story. TEDx wants you to tell their story, how they want it told.
Okay.
So I've learned a lot about TEDx talks.
Oh, well, I'll have to speak to you afterwards then.
but it's okay. They do their thing and they get some great information out there. I'm not saying it's not, but it's very structured and all that. Mm. So any plans to come to the United States?
I would love to come. I was actually invited to go to Kentucky, but it didn't work out. But yes, anybody that would like me to come over to the States, I would love to come and speak wider. So hopefully it will take place. I now have an agent, which I never had before. He contacted me. He hadn't heard me speak, but he saw a video and said he'd like to represent me. So we'll see where that goes as well.
I'd love to have you here. I'd love to come hear you and meet you and all that. But Madeleine, it's been an absolute pleasure. Where can people get a hold of you?
Yeah, so I have a website, madelineblack.co.uk. I'm across all social media on LinkedIn. I have a Facebook page, Madeleine Black Unbroken, on Twitter, Instagram, madblack65, everywhere.
We'll also include those in the show notes so people can see them there and get them there.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure, and I've really enjoyed this time, and I can't say how proud I am that you've risen above it and moved through it and came out on the other side, because so many people don't.
Yeah.
And if there's any message that I want the audience to hear is it's, yes, I can. Absolutely. Yes, we can. We can move through anything, and we can do anything our hearts desire.
Totally agree.
And with that being said, I'm going to say, see you later. Heather White, take us away. And it's been a pleasure having Madeleine here, and I can't wait to see and hear you and meet you.
Thank you so much for having me on, Art.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks for listening to the show. Drop us your comments and questions with what you want answered on the show. You can subscribe on iTunes and Binge Network. You can also get more information on the website, expectationtherapy.com.